She only understood that night would change everything. When she realized fear came before any explanation. The clock read 8:40 when the key turned in the door. For a second, she thought she must be mistaken. He never came home before 10, never. The house had learned his schedule. The silence had too. But there it was, the metallic sound of the lock. Too real to be imagination. Her heart raced before she could think of any reason. Her hands turned cold, and a strange thought crossed her mind. Fast, almost imperceptible. This wasn't supposed to be happening. She stayed seated on the couch, the television on muted. As he walked in, there was no rush, no visible tension. Everything seemed normal. Too normal. He left his shoes where he always did, hung the keys on the hook, walked past her like he did every night. "You're home early," she said, trying to hide the tightness in her chest. He smiled. A short smile, automatic, one that didn't reach his eyes. "I decided to come back earlier today." Nothing more. No story to follow the sentence. No extra detail. No attempt to fill the silence that formed between them. He went to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and stood there, staring inside, as if he had forgotten what he was looking for. The hum of the motor echoed too loudly in that moment. She realized she was holding her breath. There had been no recent fight, no accusations, no declared secrets. Even so, the air felt heavy. He returned with a glass of water, and sat on the far end of the couch. He stared at the turned-off television, as if something were playing there, something only he could see. The silence grew. She wanted to ask how his day had been, wanted to say something ordinary, wanted to break that strange feeling, but she didn't. Because some simple questions carry answers that change everything. When he finally looked at her, he took longer than usual. There was no affection, no irritation, just a steady gaze. "Too firm? Are you okay?" he asked. She said yes, too quickly. Later that night, lying in bed, she stared at the ceiling in the dark, listening to his breathing beside her. Rhythmic, controlled, as if that night were just another one. But it wasn't. She knew it. Because there are moments when nothing happens, and yet everything begins to change. And that night didn't bring shouting or arguments. It brought something worse. He came home early and left fear sitting on the couch. In silence, she woke up before the alarm. It was still dark when she opened her eyes, but the feeling from the night before hadn't gone away. The fear was still there, quiet, subtle, like something intentionally forgotten. He was still sleeping beside her. His breathing was too calm, too steady, as if nothing had gone out of control. She slowly turned her face, studying the familiar features in the darkness. She tried to find an answer there, some sign that she was overreacting, that it was all just exhaustion. But something felt different, not on his face, in the air. The silence between them felt heavier that morning. In the kitchen, while making coffee, she noticed a small detail. So small, she almost ignored it. His cup was out of place, not on its usual shelf. It was in the sink, washed. He never did that. She stood still for a few seconds, holding the coffee pot, trying to remember if she herself had moved the cup. She couldn't remember. When he appeared in the kitchen doorway, she turned too quickly. "Did you sleep well?" he asked. The question was simple, the voice neutral. Still, her body stiffened. "I did," she replied. A small lie, almost harmless. They drank their coffee in silence. Neither of them touched their phone. Neither mentioned the day ahead. It was as if they were waiting for something, without knowing what. She noticed he was watching more, not obviously. Quick glances, looked away the moment she noticed, like someone checking if something was still where it belonged. "Are you really okay?" he asked again, this time, without smiling. She nodded. The problem wasn't the question, it was the insistence. When he left the house, closing the door with excessive care, she stayed alone in the kitchen longer than necessary. The sound of the house felt different, hollow, more exposed. That's when she noticed something else. His jacket wasn't where it always was. She walked to the bedroom, opened the closet, and found it folded, neatly stored, as if it had been placed there, not to be seen. Inside the pocket, Nothing. No paper. No note. No trace. Even so, the tightness in her chest grew. Because the fear didn't come from what she found. It came from what wasn't there. She sat on the bed, feeling the silence of the house wrap around everything. For the first time, she considered a possibility she didn't want to face. Maybe he had come home early. Not to stay. Maybe he had come home early to check something or someone. She took a deep breath, trying to push the thought away. But some ideas, when they appear, don't ask for permission. They simply settle in. And as the day moved forward outside, she understood one simple, terrifying truth. That night hadn't ended. It had only changed its shape. The day dragged on, far too slowly. She tried to keep herself busy with simple things. She tidied the house, replied to old messages, left the television on just to break the silence. Nothing worked. The feeling lingered, like a low hum that never fades. In the middle of the afternoon, her phone vibrated. She looked too quickly, expecting something she couldn't quite define. It wasn't him, just an ordinary notification. Even so, she felt disappointment and relief at the same time. That's when she noticed another detail. The hallway mirror was clean. Too clean. She stopped in front of it, studying her own reflection. That mirror always had fingerprints on it. Always. An old habit. Almost invisible, but constant. Now, there was nothing. She touched the glass carefully, as if she needed to confirm it was real. The cloth that usually stayed in the cabinet was out of place. Her heart sped up. She tried to rationalize it. Maybe she had cleaned it the day before and forgotten. Maybe she was inventing stories where there were none. But something didn't fit. He wasn't that careful. When he arrived that night at the usual time, she was already waiting, not at the door, not in the living room, waiting on the inside. "You're late today," she said, like someone testing the ground before stepping. "Work," he replied, without details. Another short answer, another closed door. During dinner, he spoke little. She spoke even less. The sound of the cutlery felt too loud at that small table. She watched him in silence. The familiar gestures now felt rehearsed, every movement calculated, as if he were too aware of himself. "Did something happen?" she finally asked. He lifted his eyes slowly. "Why?" The question fell heavy between them. "Nothing," she answered quickly. "Just a feeling." He nodded, went back to eating. But he didn't seem convinced. Later, while he showered, she sat on the bed, staring at the closed bathroom door. The sound of the water was steady. Long, too long. She didn't get up, didn't search through anything, didn't ask questions. Not yet, because part of her already knew. If she looked, she would find something. And the truth doesn't always arrive when we're ready. When he came out of the shower, steam filled the room. He walked past her, dropped the towel on the chair, and began to get dressed in silence. Before turning off the light, she noticed it. A different smell. It wasn't perfume. It wasn't soap. It was something subtle, strange. Something that didn't belong to that house. She closed her eyes tightly. In that moment, she understood that the fear from the night before had a name. And that from then on, there would be no way to pretend nothing was happening. Because some details don't appear to scare us. They appear to warn us, and the warning had already been given. The warning didn't come in the form of words. It came in the form of presence. She was alone at home when she heard the sound of the gate. It wasn't his time to arrive. Still, her body reacted before her mind did. A sudden tightness in her chest, an exaggerated attention to the silence. There was a man outside. He didn't call out. He didn't knock. He didn't try to get in. He simply stood there, still, like someone who knew exactly where he was and what he had come to claim. She watched through the narrow gap in the curtain. She didn't recognize his face. Even so, she felt something familiar in that discomfort. Like a memory that didn't belong to her. Her phone vibrated. It was him. "I'll be home later today." That was all. The man outside lifted his gaze toward the house, as if he had heard something she hadn't. Then he took a few steps back and left. Without haste, without looking back. When he arrived that night, she knew. She didn't need an explanation. She didn't need questions. His body revealed what his mouth was still hiding. His shoulders were tense, his eyes restless, the silence far too old to belong to that night. "Is everything okay?" she asked. He opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. He walked around the room like someone searching for a safe place to stand. "Something happened," he said, finally. "Something I thought would never come back." Her stomach twisted. "At work?" She tried. He slowly shook his head. "From before," he replied. "Long before you." The words fell heavy between them. She wanted to ask more, wanted to demand, wanted to understand, but there was something in him, a mix of fear and shame, that made her step back. "I'll handle it," he added too quickly. "It's nothing you need to worry about. Nothing you need to worry about." She nodded, even knowing that was the biggest lie of the night. Later, lying in bed, she realized he wasn't sleeping. His breathing was uneven, his body rigid, as if he were waiting for something, or for someone. That's when she understood. Whatever that past was, it wasn't buried. And when buried things return, they don't ask permission, they collect. She spent the day trying to act as if nothing had changed. She cleaned the house, did the dishes, answered messages, did everything on autopilot, as if routine could protect her from what was growing inside. But there was something different about her. An exaggerated attention to details, a new respect for silence. She began to notice things that used to go unseen. He took longer to leave that morning, stood in front of the bedroom mirror for a few seconds, adjusting the collar of his shirt, as if he needed to look like someone he wasn't. "I'll be back on time," he said. She nodded. She didn't ask where he was going, didn't ask who he would see, but when the door closed, she felt that something had been left open. Hours later, while searching for an old document in the office drawer, she found a folder she had never seen before. It wasn't hidden. It was right there, among ordinary papers, as if it meant nothing at all. She opened it. Nothing explicit, nothing that screamed danger, just old copies, yellowed papers, a name repeated several times, his, written in a more formal way than she was used to seeing. She closed the folder too quickly, as if she had touched something that didn't belong to her. Her heart was racing. When he arrived that night, he noticed she was different, not distant, too attentive. "Did something happen?" he asked. She thought about saying no, thought about smiling, thought about pretending. "Who was the man standing in front of the house yesterday?" she asked, finally. He froze. It was fast, almost imperceptible. But it happened. "What man?" he replied. Too late. She held his gaze. "I saw him," she said. Nothing more. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument they had ever had. He ran a hand over his face, took a deep breath, and sat down. "It's not what you're thinking," he said, without conviction. She didn't answer, because the problem wasn't what she was thinking. It was what she was beginning to feel. "There are things from my life that I left behind," he continued. "Things that don't define who I am today." She nodded slowly. "But they still follow you," she added. He lifted his eyes. For the first time, he didn't try to deny it. "I just need a little more time," he said, "to explain it the right way." Time. She realized that word was always used when the truth was too close. That night, lying beside him, she understood something with painful clarity. The pieces were there, scattered, incomplete, and sooner or later, someone would have to put them together, even if the final picture wasn't what she expected to see. She didn't ask anything else that day, not because she had given up, but because she understood that some truths don't surface when they're pressed. They surface when they can no longer hide. He noticed it in the way she moved through the house, slower, in the way she answered, always polite, always distant, in the way her gaze lingered on him, as if she were learning how to look at him all over again. By late afternoon, his phone rang. She didn't see the screen, but she saw his body react. His shoulders tensed. His hand gripped the phone too tightly. He took a few steps away before answering. "Hello," he said softly. She didn't hear the conversation, but she heard the silence that came after. When he hung up, he didn't come back right away. He stood near the window, staring outside, like someone measuring the distance between the past and the present. "Who was it?" she asked. her voice too calm to feel natural. He took a moment to answer. An old matter, he said. It's already resolved. She nodded. But something inside her closed. That night, they had dinner together, as always. The same dishes, the same seats. But the table felt larger, more distant. Do you trust me? He asked suddenly. The question caught her off guard. She looked at him for a few seconds before replying. Trust doesn't disappear all at once, she said. It starts to feel out of place. He lowered his eyes. I didn't want to involve you in this, he said. Not now. So there is a this, she replied. He opened his mouth to deny it, and closed it. Right then, she knew. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't imagination. It wasn't exaggeration. Something real was being pushed beneath the silence. Later, already in bed, she felt his restlessness. Turning from side to side, held breaths. A tired, uneasy vigil. Are you going to tell me? She asked in the dark. He took so long to answer that she thought he wouldn't. I will, he said at last. But not today. She closed her eyes. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She didn't insist. Because in that moment, she understood something. With painful clarity. When someone asks for more time to tell the truth, it's because the truth weighs more than the courage required to speak it, and his past was already far too heavy to remain silent any longer. She didn't sleep well, not because he moved too much, but because the silence had changed its weight. It was no longer just the absence of words. It was waiting. In the morning he left without having breakfast. Forgot his jacket. Forgot his watch. Small oversights that didn't match someone so controlled. She stood there, staring at the closed door for a few seconds after he left. Something was about to happen, and they both knew it. The day dragged on, as if time itself were being stretched on purpose. In the middle of the afternoon, her phone rang. Unknown number. She hesitated before answering. Hello. On the other end, a male voice. Firm, unhurried. I'm looking for him. Are you family? Her heart raced. Who's calling? She asked. A brief pause. Tell him the deadline is over. The call ended. She stood still, the phone still pressed to her ear, feeling the cold creep up her arms. There was no direct threat, no explanation. Even so, the message was painfully clear. When he arrived that night, she didn't wait. Someone called, she said, the moment he stepped inside. A man, he said. The deadline is over. He stopped. Didn't try to hide it. Didn't pretend surprise. The reaction came raw. What else did he say? He asked. Nothing else. He ran a hand over his face, taking a deep breath, as if gathering strength he no longer had. I wanted to tell you in a different way, he said. At another time. But it has to be now, she replied calmly. It wasn't harshness. It was exhaustion. He nodded slowly. There are things from my past. I never told you because I thought they no longer belonged to me, he began. I changed my life. I changed my choices. But not everything stayed behind the way I thought it had. She sat down on the couch, feeling the weight of his words. What's happening now, he continued, has nothing to do with who I am today. But it has everything to do with who I was. She took a deep breath. Do you think that protects me? She asked, not knowing. He closed his eyes for a moment. I thought it did. Silence spread between them. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was heavy. With something that was about to be said. She stood up slowly. I don't need all the details right now, she said. But I need to know one thing. He looked at her. Is this going to fall on both of us? He took a few seconds before answering. It could, he admitted. If I don't speak. She nodded. Right then, she understood. The truth was already in the room. It just hadn't been spoken out loud yet. And when it was, nothing would ever be the same again. He took a while to begin, not for lack of words, but because some truths demand that we first accept who we once were. Before I met you, he said, his voice low, I was trying to fix a life that had been broken for a long time. He kept his eyes on the table, as if the past were carved there. Between the lines of the wood, I wasn't a bad man, but I wasn't strong either. I was in debt, under pressure, trying to solve problems that weren't only mine. Believing I could do it the wrong way without paying too high a price. She didn't move, didn't speak, she just listened. I forged documents, he continued, without lifting his head, not to hurt anyone. There was no violence, but it was illegal, and I knew it. The word hung in the air, heavy final. I was caught, tried, imprisoned. He took a deep breath, as if that air had been trapped in his chest for years. It wasn't long, but it was long enough to lose everything I had, and to understand what I never wanted to be again. She felt a tightness in her stomach, not fear, shock. When I got out, I decided to start over. For real, work honestly, walk straight, become better than who I was, and I did. But I never had the courage to tell you. He finally lifted his eyes. There was no anger there, no excuses, only shame. Because I knew that after this, you would never look at me the same way again. Silence spread between them. That man who showed up, she said carefully, he's part of that past. A mistake I thought was buried. He didn't come back to take me to prison again. He came back to remind me of who I was. He leaned forward slightly. I came home early that night because I thought everything was about to collapse. Because I was afraid of losing you without ever being honest. His voice faltered. I didn't hide this because I don't trust you. I hid it because I didn't trust myself. Because I was afraid my past would destroy what I love most today. She closed her eyes for a moment. There was no dangerous criminal there. There was a man marked by bad choices. And by years trying to be better than them. I don't know what you're going to decide, he said, almost in a whisper. But I had to tell you, even if it costs me you. She remained silent. Because some truths don't ask for immediate answers. They ask for time. They ask for understanding. And the decision that would come afterward still needed to be born within her. She didn't answer right away. Not because she hadn't heard, but because some truths ask for silence. Before any word, she stood up slowly and walked to the window. The night was far too quiet for everything that had just been said. When you came home early that night, she said, without turning her face, I thought I was losing the man I knew. He didn't answer. He knew that sentence wasn't an accusation. It was a confession. Today, I understand, she continued, that I was meeting a whole man, not just the beautiful part of him. She took a deep breath. What scared me wasn't what you did. It was the fear I felt of never having been worthy of the truth. He closed his eyes. That hurt more than any judgment ever could. I can't change your past, she said, and I won't pretend it doesn't exist. But I see what you did after it. I see the man you chose to be. Every single day. She turned toward him. A mistake doesn't define who you are, but the way you live after it, that does. His eyes filled with tears, not of relief, but of something rarer, permission to breathe. I don't promise it will be easy, she continued. Trust doesn't return all at once. But I'd rather face a hard truth than a love built in silence. She stepped closer, standing in front of him. If you had kept hiding this, I would have lost you anyway. Today, I choose to stay, not because I forgot the past, but because I believe in the present you've built. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His hand found hers carefully, like someone who understands that beginnings also require gentleness. That night, there were no grand promises. There were no perfect endings. But there was something stronger, a love that stopped being ideal, and finally became real. And sometimes, that is exactly what saves two people.